It's becoming the de rigueur fashion of the day in politics to do U-turns. It's not going to be women and children first, although this is what Mr Farage said on Tuesday about that.
And the interesting thing about that is, in that first thing that was in the press conference, he was then questioned directly afterwards. So you are saying that you would deport women and children, and he said yes. But then yesterday said the media got it wrong. It takes some, what's the word? To actually say that when it's been recorded on film.
Indeed. And do you remember when I was on the programme, I think Monday or Tuesday, I was making this point about women and children.
You did,
about,
that's quite right.
You know, are you going to send women and children back to Sudan, where rape is being used as a weapon in war in that awful conflict that's happening in Sudan?
Or you know, Afghanistan, where
exactly.
rights of women and the people have fled there from...
And at that point, do you remember, Richard, you were pointing out there was a quote from Nigel Farage in one of the papers saying, I'm not responsible for what goes on in the world.
That's right.
You know, and that we understood to be their policy. They've obviously had a bit of a backlash to that. He's U-turning. And I think what this speaks to is a broader sense that, yes, he's great at getting the headlines, but they just slightly shoot from the hip. Are their plans really properly worked out? Are they really ready to form a government? When I used to come on your programme as a shadow minister, I used to make sure, when I was the shadow health secretary or the shadow welfare secretary, I was always very anxious to make sure what I was talking about, that all my policies were worked out, and they weren't going to crumble under scrutiny, because that's the obligation you are under when you're auditioning for government. And I think there are, even though they've got a very good poll lead, I think people will start to think, as you get closer to an election, right, does this all add up?
Well, it comes to us, Richard and I, we found, because on reform, possibly because it threatens both the Conservative and the Labour Party in terms of popularity, that we end up putting the reform case quite a lot, don't we? Yeah. And one of the things that he might argue is, has a Labour shadow or a Labour Conservative person not ever misspoke? I mean, there's an inexperience there, isn't it, that Jonathan's
But that happens all the time. What I would say, I mean, the difference between him and you, respectfully, is that he's the party leader. So he's shooting from the hip. He's been doing this for 25, 30 years in various guises. And he's not often consistent. I don't think they've worked through the plan. I don't think, you know, he's somebody who's got a team of policy advisors scrutinising and costing all the policies. And he is a maverick who's very free with his opinions. And actually, I was very interested in the clip. He probably thought that he was right. He probably didn't remember exactly what he'd said, because clearly the two clips you showed, he was contradicting himself. But in the moment, often when you say something, you don't remember what you would have said.
Why do you think, however you interpret it, he wobbled in that way yesterday? You talk about maybe he's responding to some sort of backlash, but the only backlash that I've seen has been in the media, in the British media, and not all of the British media either.
Sure.
The general support that he clearly has in the polls seems to echo his comment in the interview with The Times, which teed up the speech on Tuesday, which was basically those questions about people being tortured if they go back, being executed if they go back, what about women and children? There's a kind of collective shrug. Well, I just don't care anymore.
Yeah.
I don't care about that. So why do you think he wobbled?
I think it's probably something to do internally with the party.
So,
I mean, typically when something like that happens, your chief of staff or whoever it is behind the scenes will say, are we really saying this? And then at some time you might think, actually, you know, we got to finish
internal
the position.
politics. Yeah.
So that's what I saw when he contradicted himself that's quickly. I mean, it was only a day between the two statements.
The problem is, though, isn't it, for both the Conservatives and Labour, is that in terms of hearts and minds, you know, what Richard said, I think probably if you ask people individually, do you care if a child goes back and tortured? Do you care if a woman or a man is gone back and tortured, raped? Then they would say, of course we do. But actually there's a feeling of, I've got enough problems of our own.
Sure.
And I've got enough problems in this country. I've run out of empathy. Now, that's not everybody.
Yeah, but a lot of
But there
people.
feels like... And that is what he is winning the hearts and minds of.
Yeah.
So if either party doesn't grab and do something, regardless of that kind of thing, he will win election.
Look, I mean, look, don't get me wrong. There is anger in the country of what they see as widespread abuse of this system.
Yeah.
And look, I always think it's important always to step back and to look that there are terrible things happening in Afghanistan, in Sudan, in parts of the world, and it's understandable that people would want to flee persecution, would want to flee rape and torture, and that we've always been welcoming, and we should have a proper asylum system. But where there is clear abuse, where people are essentially economic migrants and are not actual asylum seekers, where their applications are not endorsed, where their applications are rejected, people do need to be returned.
But the broader picture that Farage has really nailed is the fact that, you know, people aren't looking at the detail. They just see this is a complete mess, and Nigel is the only person who's really talking about it.
But that is politics now, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the broad brush.
That is what people vote with. You know, in the end, they just get overwhelmed to think, well, this is what my heart or my gut or whatever is saying. So that is a problem.
But the problem
for the formerly main
Nigel,
party.
it's all very well him getting the broad brush right, but if he's contradicting himself within, 24 hours, there's clearly a policy issue and he hasn't worked out what his actual position is.
He's got plenty of time to do that, though, hasn't he?
He may do, but there'll be a whole host of other issues where he'll be flip-flopping or whatever the phrase is.
Meanwhile, we have a double court case today over the Bell Hotel in Epping. We've got the owners of the hotel challenging the High Court ruling last week, saying that they've got to get rid of the asylum seekers from the hotel in, 24 days. And you've got the Home Office making a very similar appeal, saying, whoa, this is causing us major... Where are we going to put these people? We need time. Well, I wonder what kind of judgment we're going to see coming out of today.
I'd be surprised. I suspect, and I don't want to put money on it, but I suspect the government may well come out on top on this.
Do you think they'll get a stay of execution?
So I felt sorry for the government on this, because in a situation like that, you have to appeal. You know, if there's a cornerstone of your policy, regardless of what it is, there's huge financial impact. And if a court says, actually, you can't put these people in this hotel, what are you going to do?
OK, but what people don't understand is it's a government policy to close the asylum hotels. So there will be people saying, read the room. You know, this is the people in the community have said this. It's your policy to close them. Yeah. Why spend more taxpayers' money on keeping this particular one open, Jonathan?
Sorry.
Well,
no.
But because at the moment, that is the cheapest and the most effective way to house these asylum seekers. Like Nigel Farage is saying build detention centres. He's essentially saying build 5 prisons. He won't say where. He says we've got a short list, but he refuses to reveal where. He knows as soon as he says we're going to put one of these prisons here, then there'll be an outcry in that part of the country. So he's keeping that under wraps.
Well, we put that point to his chief of staff when we interviewed him on Tuesday on the programme, and his response was to say, yes, but asylum seekers who are being put into hotels are free to wander into the community, and you see the current court case at the moment. But if we put them in internment camps, they'll be behind barbed wire, and they won't be free to enter the local
essentially
community.
A prison. And I bet your bottom dollar, wherever they go, the people who live there will not want that in their area.
But if your bet is right, and I'm with you, I think that the government will get a stay of execution today. Then the good people of Epping are going to go crackers.
Yes.
Aren't they? They're going to go crackers because they were cheering the decision to the rooftops last week.
But you see, the alternative for the government is that every other council, lots of other councils, will take them to the court. And then they've got to find room for the asylum seekers who aren't allowed to be in the hotels.
But the backlash is going to be huge.
Oh, it's a rock and a hard place,
you've got to, you know, the government has to manage the system.
Yeah.
They can't just say, actually, you know, we're going to just, you know, forget our responsibility to house these people. They've got to house them somewhere. And they don't have the detention centres, so at the moment they've got to use these hotels.
So we're speaking to the Refugee Council, Enver Solomon. We saw him in our news bulletin earlier, and one of their proposals is this could be resolved very quickly by using HMOs and putting people in the community, giving them a sort of 6-month where certain people are allowed to come in and work. What is wrong with that idea? Because if people could see 6 months to the end of the hotels in their communities, that might shift things. Why can't the government do that?
But the question is, what happens after the 6 months? And then you've got this question of...
Well, they would deport those that don't get asylum.
Yeah, but what about the ones that do? And also,
well, why couldn't they... I think the proposal is they would work and be in, you know, within community and have a...
I remember when I was an MP, we had a hotel that was exactly used for this purpose. And it had about sort of 90 rooms. It had the capacity to house all these people. And it was a big issue of concern. With the HMOs, you know, what are you going to have? Are you going to have, like, maybe 6 people in one HMO and then 10 people in another? it's very difficult, I think, to operate. You've got to find the capacity in terms of the places available.
And what will the neighbours think?
Exactly. So I think that is a worse solution
I mean,
to the imperfect solution we have now.
Exactly. These HMOs, which is sort of like, you know, bed-sit-style accommodation. You know, old terrace houses are turned into these sort of one-bedroom... Well,
I mean, a lot of people live in them anyway, regardless of being... You know, they're increasingly used for people who can't afford to rent apartments.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
Look, I think we can't sort of kid ourselves. Wherever people go, there will... local residents...
There'll be resistance.
There'll be resistance. And that is a system that government has to manage. It's why I strongly believe, you know, it's a responsibility of ministers and everybody in politics to try and lower the temperature on this as well and not whip up anger.
But on Kate's point...
People won't support it.
On Kate's point about good, decent people just running out of empathy. They've just had enough. It's typified in this call we've had from Angela not call, she's emailed us to say, I'm astounded at the comment, this is from our news bulletin earlier, that illegal immigrants feel isolated and lonely in the hotels. What on earth do they expect to feel when they flood into this country illegally and there's not enough accommodation to house them all? You see, the shutters have come coming down,
and also
aren't
the issue is, you know, we've got to... You talked about the rental crisis. There is a housing crisis or need to build more houses. And what people think is that, well, how does this bloke, you know, from wherever, Afghanistan, get a 4-star hotel or whatever it is?
And I'm struggling.
And I can't afford to get a decent place to live. And actually, the hotel in my constituency, which was used, was a pretty good hotel.
Can we just glance across the Atlantic? This awful story that broke yesterday evening, morning American time in Minnesota. Yet another school shooting. 2 little children under the age of 10 slain as they were at morning prayers on their first day back at school. Many more wounded, 17 children wounded. All the usual cries from all the usual places of never again, we have to stop this. But America's gun laws make repeats of this tragedy inevitable, don't they?
I mean, it's just horrific, isn't it? How often do we see these awful stories? And it's a bit of like how American politics, it comes across as bonkers to me compared to our politics, where the fact that this issue about guns, where they all want to be able to have their guns, and it's like they consider a gun their sort of constitutional right. I mean, it's mad. But it
is their... I mean, the problem you have is that you've got a constitution which to them is, you know, a sacred
sacrosanct,
document, exactly, sacrosanct. And the Second Amendment, not the 20th,
the right to bear arms. The right to bear arms.
Right at the top is the right to bear arms.
Yeah.
And unless you can get some sort of constitutional amendment, it's very difficult, I think, to see how you can change
but
it.
I don't think a constitutional amendment or a change in the law, which isn't going to happen because the gun lobby is so powerful there with the National Rifle Association, I don't think it would make the slightest difference. I did a little bit of online research this morning when I came in. Do you know there are over 400 million guns in legal circulation in America as we speak? They're already out there. That's more than 1 gun per head of population. 9 billion bullets were manufactured last year alone in America. The stockpile of ammunition is an Everest-sized one. So basically, given that guns, if they're kept in a drawer and kept oiled, they last forever. I mean, we were saying earlier, the First World War revolver will fire perfectly efficiently, provided it's been kept in a drawer and oiled. These guns are there forever now in America. You could have a change in the law at 9 o'clock this morning that banned the sale of guns anywhere in America. You've still got over 400 million guns out there, and they're never going to give them back.
Well,
they would never give them back.
You know, look, I mean, I know there's lots of things wrong with our politics, but thank God that we don't have arguments about guns in our general election campaigns and whether we should ban them.
We might have a knife crime issue, but we don't have
But I
guns,
remember, you know, many of us remember Dunblane, and there was a whole debate about that. And I was a student. Horrible thing. And actually, we passed very restrictive legislation immediately. And I think that's had an effect.
There's no political dispute about that. All the parties recognised that something had to be done.
And actually, even at the time, I remember, I wasn't in the House of Commons, but there was a debate. People were saying, well, you know, this is civil liberties and all the rest of it. That debate was had.
But nothing like the scale of American debate.
And it's not entrenched in the Constitution.
And they look to us and they can't quite believe that we did that we brought in a ban and it stopped straight away because they have such a different
culture. It definitely, I think, had an effect.
Looking back here to move through some other, you know, challenges, we're talking about people feeling overwhelmed and a lack of hope. I don't want to talk down this country at all because it's the exact opposite that we want to do. But it does feel like it now, you know, the Chancellor having a tax raid on landlords, there won't be a lot of sympathy for a lot of landlords, particularly with some of those terrible stories we saw in the news. But for a lot of people, they might have one extra house that maybe one person in the family had from being a student or whatever, and they're now having national insurance, so that's fine. And then on top of that, the hike in energy bills. People are feeling, oh, my goodness, where is it going to stop? And it looks like wind farms are the problem because we don't know how to distribute it. Ed Miliband is going to be upset, isn't he, Jonathan?
We'll be very upset because he loves the wind farms. Look, we all know that the economy and Rachel Reeves faces all these challenges in the run-up to this budget, which is probably going to be October or November. She sounds like she's going to have to look at some tax increases. You know, for what it's worth, I do think landlords, you know, have done well in recent years. Maybe that is a
They've probably done well about 10 years ago. In recent years, it's been a lot tougher.
There's been a lot
and of course, they're just going to pass this on in rent.
So look,
they still have to cover
my view is that I think landlords, until about, as you say, 10 years ago, were doing very well.
Yeah.
But they've had a flood of legislation really against their interests.
And more rates going up.
I used to hear this as an MP. You know, a lot of people, they might have had one flat or one house as a kind of buy-to-let, you know, for their
pension.
And the number of people, when I was an MP, you know, until last year, who said, actually, Resi is dead. That's what they used to say. There's no point us doing this. And I think a lot of people, and they're not rich people. I mean, they're people who've saved up. They might have bought an apartment, you know, in a semi-rural place
as an investment,
and as a form of pension. They've all given that up, and I think, you know, to keep coming after landlords is very difficult.
Well, it's not certain.
Where else can she go, though?
They're looking at it.
So can I just say something about it? I mean, from experience, the Treasury will trail, or her SPADs, her special advisors will trail all sorts of policies. So they're flying kites all the time.
And if nobody makes a fuss, is that the idea? That you chuck it out there?
That's right.
And if it goes calm, Jonathan's smiling. Is that what she's doing?
I can see that's what's happening.
Is that what you did in the run-up to your budget?
No, that was what we didn't do. We did the opposite. We did the opposite.
You didn't trail it enough.
But they do, if they have a lot of time, especially over the summer, you see all these stories. And you know, when I was working...
Kite flying.
Exactly.
Well, let's talk about wind farms. This is really interesting. Ofgem, of course, announced yesterday that the hike of 2% in energy prices. And it's now said that the higher-than-expected rise, this is the Times reporting this morning, that this higher-than-expected rise was driven by an increase in electricity balancing costs, and that's to do with wind farms. And the story here is, and the Times are saying, that people need to benefit from cheap renewables rather than paying to turn off wind farms and then paying more for gas to replace the wasted wind. That's the equation. Incredibly, we have to pay to switch off wind farms when we can't use the energy that they're supplying on the national grid, and that has contributed to at least half the increase in costs.
Sure.
This is to do with lack of being able to distribute. It's lack of infrastructure, isn't it? You know?
You don't know. You can't predict. It's not like with nuclear, you can predict exactly how much power is going to be produced by the nuclear power station, roughly. With wind power, nobody knows what the...
It's not just that, though, is it? Because if you get an overload... it's to do with the infrastructure. As usual, we've got the first bit right. All wind farms are working, but now we don't know how to get it round the grid.
No, so that's true, but the fact that it's called intermittent, that means that it's not continual, has a huge effect. Because sometimes, if it's very, very windy, it'll generate lots and lots of power.
But we need to know how to store it. But it would cost us to switch them off. I mean, that just seems contraindicated.
Yeah.
No, but we've always had to, National Grid, we've always had to balance the grid, because you've got to have an even distribution of the power. And sometimes it might be very, you generate huge amounts in one part of the country.
Why
and very
can't you
little.
store it? Sorry if that sounds stupid.
Well, battery technology isn't really. I mean, we're working on it, but it's very difficult to store energy for a very long period of time. You need the technology, you need the battery power to be able to do that, and we don't quite have the technology to do that very efficiently.
The Liberal leader Ed Davey has announced that he's going to boycott the royal dinner at Windsor Castle, state banquet for Donald Trump. He's going to boycott it because he disapproves of Trump's stance on Gaza. Do you think Trump will notice?
I don't think he's ever heard of Ed Davey. I don't think he's ever heard... He doesn't have a clue who this man is. I think Ed is doing what he is good at in generating publicity for himself and his cause.
He is very good at that.
He is good at that. Yeah. I mean, we saw that in the last general election, but I don't think Donald Trump's ever heard of him.
I think Donald Trump will be following very closely what the Liberal Democrats are up to. Look, he's got nothing to lose by this. All he does is get himself publicity. And look, we started off talking about Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage has got, what, 4 or 5 MPs? Ed Davey's got, what, 70, 80 MPs? I mean, he's actually got a big parliamentary party, really, but... You know, he's got to find ways to create the political weather.
Yes.
He's competing with the likes of Nigel Farage in that.
Yeah.
So, look, that's
he's got to generate headlines. This is quite an effective.
But is it a straw in the wind? Do you think we're going to see... Well, I'm sure we're going to see quite a lot of pushback and demos against Trump's visit when he gets it.
Oh.
It could be quite embarrassing.
I mean, there'll be huge demonstrations, but look, it's still important that our Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has a close working relationship with the United States. United Kingdom and the United States are allies, always have been allies. If you remember, you know, as we're coming on the programme, before Trump became president, there was lots of our debates was, how's he going to get on with the Labour Prime Minister? It's not going to go well, you know, because of what Labour politicians have said in the past. Actually, Keir Starmer has built this rapport and connection.
They've had to pivot. I mean, that's the reality.
But that's a good thing.
No, I think it's a good thing. Of course, they had to do that. Because...
Do you think... I must say, I was thinking about this driving in this morning. Do you think in 3.5, 4 years' time, when Trump has to go and it's all over, do you think almost within hours, people who at the moment are blowing smoke are going to turn around and say, I only said that because I had to?
They'll say,
I only said that. I never really believed it.
Richard, what you'll find is politicians are always consistent. They never change their mind.
I always had my doubts. I always had my reservations.
Or at least consistently inconsistent, anyway, which is the next step. Let's talk about a couple of disturbing stories. This huge surge in child sextortion cases, up 72% in a year, and 97% of victims are boys. Now, we hear a lot, don't we, about toxic masculinity, concern about boys, but perhaps sometimes forget how much they are victims of a toxic problem as well. It's very disturbing.
And some of this is via online.
Yeah.
And this is why the government have introduced those restrictions on accessing the internet for people under 18, this Online Safety Act, which a few weeks ago, wasn't there? There was a big bust-up between Labour and, again, Nigel Farage.
That's right.
Because Nigel Farage wants to get rid of these restrictions, and one of the Labour politicians says, well, you're basically, you know, you'd be siding with Jimmy Savile or something. I mean, it was a big bust-up, but the point was that I think parents do want their children to be protected online. I think every parent worries about what their kids are looking at on Snapchat and these gaming sites like Roblox.
And all of us have talked about online. And safety, you know, the threat to children. And I think this is one area in which government and parliament are sort of lagging behind and playing catch-up. Because, you know, there's so much of this stuff is going on social media, so much of it is online. And ministers, civil servants, you know, the government, as a broad, you know, definition, aren't really that aware of all the dangers out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you worried about the falling birth rate? So I'm old enough to remember, particularly in the 80s, I see my parents, everybody talking about this population explosion and how the world couldn't cope and everything. Now, it's the opposite. Economies around the world, it's not just ours, in developing countries too, have seen this decline in population. Of course, what economists are worried about is that means you haven't got enough people to take care of the old in the future.
And pay the pensions.
And pay the pensions and pay for all the services, you know.
What are we going to do, guys?
Well, I mean, what Rachel Reeves and Labour tried to do, and I backed them on this, was to try and get people who are out of work in the UK back into work. I think that's a big problem in this whole thing.
Future, though, is it? Or is it?
Could be, because we've got something like 8 million people on some form of benefits, and obviously the majority of those are legitimate. But if we can get some of those people back into work, that could address some of the problems.
I think part of the problem is that romance is dying. There's a new survey. And I'm back
to a good point, Richard. I'm coming on to that.
This is a window into your life, Richard.
A new survey has found that a fifth of couples are marrying only for the legal and financial advantage.
We've had comments from you this morning, because we're debating it later in the show, already saying, you know, yes, you get together for love, but they've married very late in, like, 30 years together because they're suddenly aware that their partner wouldn't get a pension or wouldn't get rights to the
But that's
property.
always been the case. I mean, that's not different now.
Should people always marry for love?
No, I mean...
No,
but more
Kwasi?
people... No,
God, your missus is lucky, isn't she?
She's not going to give you a good treatment when you get home.
More people are marrying today not for love than they used to. It used to be that romance fronted up.
There are
the arrangement.
lots of reasons why people get married, and there are lots of private reasons. But it is true.
Kwasi's skirting around the issue because he's worried what his missus is going to say.
She doesn't.
Go on.
She won't watch.
She doesn't watch. All right, she's not watching. Tell us the truth.
Go on, Kwasi.
But the issue is that there's a lot of social pressure, there's a lot of financial pressure.
Of course.
And people are finding ways to get around that. Now, some people might go out or choose to be in a couple and not get married.
Yeah.
But there are incentives to get married, and it's naive not to recognise that.
But I actually think on that point about financial. Weighing up the finances. I think that is one of the issues that families increasingly take into account with children now.
That's with
Absolutely,
children.
Because of the cost of childcare, the cost of bringing up children.
Right.
I think there's lots of people who would like to have 3 or 4 children, but actually genuinely think, you know what?
We can't
really
do it
afford
because we can't work and pay for the childcare.
Can't get a house that is big enough, or and all.
It'd be quite interesting to look at data in terms of 3 children families and track that over the last few years.
It would be.
Because that's my sense is that there are far fewer of those.
I think
when we were growing up,
Lawrence, do you have 2 children?
Go and have 2 or 3 coffees. Keep watching the show, and we'll see you back here at about 8:45. Hear what you think.
They're going off to talk about love and romance now between them.
he's going to be ringing his wife.
Yeah, quite. Yeah, quite.